Admiral, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Let's focus on the Middle East first and get some perspective from you on how Secretary of State Antony Blinken's trip to the Middle East, the region went.
Well, this is, I think, his 5th or 6th trip, and just since October 7th, he's spending a lot of time in the region. And it's important time because it gives him a chance to talk to our partners all across the area about things like humanitarian assistance and getting that into Gaza, seeing if we can't accelerate that, seeing if we can't get back into a hostage release deal so we can get those hostages home with their families. And obviously, the last couple of days he spent in Israel with our counterparts there, talking to them about the progress of their operations, what their thoughts are in terms of transitioning to lower intensity operations, what that looks like, and again, making sure that they know they're going to continue to get the support they need from the United States.
What was the key message that Secretary Blinken took from President Biden to Israel, to Benjamin Netanyahu?
Very simple. Same messages that we've been sending to Israel, and that is that we stand solidly behind them in their right to defend themselves. In fact, their responsibility to defend themselves against this terrorist threat that Hamas poses, which is quite an existential one if you look at what Hamas is out there saying. Number two, it's, what can we do together to make sure that we can increase the flow of humanitarian assistance into Gaza and decrease the number of civilian casualties, because there's just been many, many thousands, and we don't want to see a single more civilian harmed here. And then lastly, and this is really a conversation that he's had, across the region, is what can we do to prevent this conflict from escalating or widening and becoming a deeper, broader regional war?
As you're aware, a lot of people around the world are asking, at what point does the word defense no longer apply to what Israel's doing?
Right now, they face a still significant, viable threat by Hamas, a group that has claimed that they want to do October 7th over and over again. And again, you don't have to read anything more than their quotes in their literature to see what their vision is for Israel and for the Israeli people.
Well, when it comes to the situation that people in Gaza are facing right now, of course, it may sound premature to talk about the post-conflict situation, but what would you describe as the US position on that? Is it the displacement of Palestinians that's being discussed? Is it some kind of different administration?
I would disagree with those who think it's too early to talk about post-conflict Gaza. I think now is the right time. In fact, we have been talking about post-conflict Gaza and what governance looks like there. So we are actively having those conversations, and that too is part of what Secretary Blinken is talking to the Israelis about, as well as our partners in the region. Look, we've been very clear and we've been very consistent. We don't support a reoccupation of Gaza by Israeli military forces. We don't support any forced displacement outside of Gaza of the Palestinian people. That's home. That's where they call home. And they have every right to go back and live there and work there and prosper there. In order for those things to happen, they've got to have a voice. They've got to have a vote and a say in what governance looks like in Gaza. And because of that, Jake Sullivan and was recently, talking to Mahmoud Abbas, and we believe that a revamped, revitalized Palestinian Authority can be a big part of that solution.
With the situation the way it's gone on, the prolonged situation in Gaza, there's going to be generations affected. There's going to be, it's the ideology that might perhaps not change, irrespective of Hamas being there or not.
There's already, I think, without question, now, just given the scope of the fighting there and the casualties, that you're going to see a generational impact here, which is all the more reason. It's so important that we make sure that as we talk about what the post-conflict era looks like, that the Palestinians have a voice, that they have a vote, that they have a say in their future, that they get to determine what that looks like for them. Because it is, to your very question, it is a generational issue.
Well, then isn't what Israel doing now essentially counterproductive? All they're going to do is create more generations of hate and anger.
Again, we have been urging them to be as precise, as cautious, as deliberate, as careful as they can be in these operations so that they can minimize the impact, obviously on civilian lives, but also to civilian infrastructure, because there's going to be a need for recovery and reconstruction too when this is over.
The recent killing of the Hamas leader Saleh al-Aruri in Lebanon with the drone attack that's been attributed to Israel, along with the cross-border skirmishes with Hezbollah, the attacks taking place, it seems the conflict is spreading wider. And of course now with the Houthis also making their presence very much known, US vessel recently attacked. Israel has said it's going to go after Hamas, whether it's in Lebanon, in Turkey, even in Qatar. At what point will the US set a limit on what Israel can do outside?
I'm not going to get ahead of where we are in the decision-making process, and I'm not going to speculate on hypotheticals. Israel has a right and responsibility to go after Hamas. Certainly a key part of that strategy is going after the leadership, but that's not unusual. I mean, that's how we got after ISIS, and it's how we got after Al-Qaeda. But we would expect them to do that, as we've said many, many times, in accordance with international law.
But if it's, well, I was going to say, for a lot of people, it breaches international law, because if there's going to be Israel attacks in Qatar after Hamas, that's seen as a...
Well, again, I won't speculate about potential operations that the Israelis may or may not do. Our expectation, and we've conveyed this to the Israelis, is of course that they would conduct their operations in accordance with international law.
How important is Egypt's role in all of this?
Very, very important. And Egypt has been a very key partner, and we're grateful for the leadership of President al-Sisi. Getting that Rafah gate open, allowing for the transit out of foreign nationals, including hundreds and hundreds of Americans that needed to get out, and then continuing to work to make sure that that assistance, the humanitarian assistance that gets into Gaza, is getting in at a rate, obviously not that we would all like to see. We'd like to see it higher, but at least a consistent rate of humanitarian assistance going in. So President al-Sisi in Egypt, they've been very strong here, and we're very grateful for that support.
So what are your thoughts? What's your perspective on the International Court of Justice in The Hague now taking up South Africa's call for some kind of action?
We think that that's just meritless and it's counterproductive. And as we've said many, many times, there's absolutely no indication that Israel is involved in genocidal actions at all. Now, again, I want to stress over and over again, one civilian casualty is one too many. We don't want to see any. And we recognize that many, many thousands have been killed, many more thousands wounded, hundreds of thousands displaced from their homes. We recognize the humanitarian crisis that's going on in Gaza. But the Israeli Defense Forces are not waking up every day, rolling out of the rack, putting their feet on the floor and saying, hey, let's go wipe the Palestinian people off the face of the map. That's genocide, and that's not what's happening. You know who does have genocidal intent? It's Hamas. And they said so. They don't believe that Israel has a right to exist as a nation. And they violated the ceasefire. A ceasefire that was in place on October 6th, they violated, jumping in to a music festival and slaughtering innocent people that were simply there to enjoy some good times.
Oh, then let me get your perspective on the idea that had Hamas, and this is a hypothetical, had Hamas gone in, simply taken hostages, not committed any of those acts, shooting and killing and so on, how would this have panned out differently?
We could sit all day, you and me, and talk about counterfactuals or what might have happened. I don't think anybody could predict that. I mean, all I do know is what did happen. There was a ceasefire on the 6th of October. On the 7th of October, Mr. Sinwar decided, I'm going to bust that ceasefire and I'm going to go slaughter Israelis and I'm going to go take a bunch hostage. That was his playbook. He's the one who started this war. He's the one that violated that ceasefire. And he's the one, quite frankly, that the people of Gaza should be holding responsible for what's happening.
So how do you regard the UN Secretary General's quote that nothing happens in a vacuum?
Well, I'd let the Secretary General speak to that quote in the context he was making it. I think if we're talking about the long history here, we all recognize there's a long history here. But we need to focus on what happened on the 7th of October. And again, on the 6th of October, there was a ceasefire. There had been an understanding between the Israeli government and Hamas. And Mr. Sinwar decided to break that understanding.
Now, President Biden's encountered a few hecklers. He's had people protesting. It's been a little small scale now, but it indicates a wider, perhaps, discontent among some parts of the American public regarding the position the US has in the situation. Ultimately, voters. How do you think this might pan out?
I won't get into speaking about elections. That's beyond my writ, and I'm not allowed to do that. I will tell you a couple of things. President Biden understands that there's strong feelings on all sides here. He recognizes that. He respects that. That's one of the great things about this country is freedom of speech, and he respects that. But he also believes that he has to make decisions based on principles, not on polls, but on principles. And the principles at stake here for President Biden have not changed since the 7th of October. Number one, we're going to help Israel defend itself. They have a right and responsibility to do that. Two, we're going to do whatever we can to make sure that civilian casualties are minimized. And we have been working with the Israelis to do that. Again, recognizing that there have been too many killed. I'm not walking away from that. Number three, that humanitarian assistance continues to get food, water, medicine, the kinds of things that the people of Gaza need. We are leading the world, the United States, literally leading the world in trying to get that humanitarian assistance in.
But it does sound, Admiral, that it's a bit of a broken record with the Israel has a right to defend itself and that we are trying to get help. It's for the situation in Gaza right now, it still doesn't seem any really different.
I would disagree that it's a broken record. It's a matter of principle. And they still face, the Israelis still face, a very viable threat by Hamas. Yes, they have disrupted some operations. They have killed some of the leadership, but there's still a significant Hamas presence in Gaza. Again, that has made clear their intent to wipe Israel off the face of the map and to conduct another attack like October 7th again and again and again. And you tell me what country living next door to that threat, which isn't a perceived threat, it's an overt threat, what country would tolerate that?
I'm going to, as we're running out of time, I'm going to just shift on to one thing that's in the news right now. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, of course, disappeared for a number of days, and even the president didn't even know. A lot of people are now discussing that as a potentially problematic issue for the administration. What kind of disciplinary action will be taken? What kind of impact might that have?
The president has full faith and confidence in his defense secretary. Secretary Austin has led our U.S. military through some very, very challenging times and continues to do that. And the president values his counsel, his leadership, and he wants him to stay on at the helm at the Pentagon. There's not going to be a change in that regard.
It's an unusual situation, though.
Well, I mean, it is, as we've said, not optimal that he was being hospitalized for, now we know, cancer, and nobody here at the White House was aware. That is not the way it's supposed to be done, which is why our Chief of Staff, Jeff Zients, put out a memo to all cabinet agencies yesterday that we want them to review their protocols when they delegate authority down to a deputy and inform the White House of when they're doing that. And I think the Pentagon is also putting in place some changes into their procedures so that this doesn't happen again.
Admiral Kirby, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank
Good
you.
to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you.